Good evening. Tonight we are going to continue our fraction unit, starting with lesson 30. I can add a mixed number and a fraction. We are going to do this and demonstrate using two different types of methods. We're going to add some fractions, but we're also going to go back and try those number bonds that we have been learning. And we're also going to be starting something new called the arrow method. And so these are going to be two different types of strategies that we're going to try out today. And then at the end of this, you'll kind of get to decide which method works for you and how you want to solve these mixed numbers and adding. All right, let's get started. So it's asking us to solve 4 1/3 plus 1/3. And that's basically how this would be written up. We have 4 1s, we have 1/3 plus 1/3. So this is our whole, and this makes it a mixed number because when we have a mixed number, we have a whole attached to a fraction. So how we would solve this is we would bring over your whole, and then we would add the numerator, which would be 1 plus 1, which give us 2, and the denominator, which is thirds, always stays the same. When I was your age, I had a very bad habit, and when I was adding fractions, I would add these and I would put a 6 here. Do not do that. Remember, we learn from our mistakes, and I learned that when we have a common denominator like this, like units, it stays the same. We are only going to add the numerator, and we got 2. Okay, continuing, 5 1/4. This is our mixed number because we have a whole attached to a fraction, plus 2/4 gives us, well, I'll bring over our whole, which is a 5. Our numerator is a 3. And remember, our denominator stays the same. So it's 5 3/4. 2 6 plus 3 4 6. Now, don't go crazy here. Don't freak out on me here, because don't think that it does look weird, because we're usually seeing the mixed number go first before the other fraction. But it's still the same. Just look at that whole number, and we're going to bring it over. So when we add, let's bring over your whole number, which is 3. And our numerator is 2 plus 4, which is 6. And our denominator stays the same, which is 6. But remember, 3 and 6, 6. 6, 6 really is equal to a whole. So this would be 3 plus 1 whole, which would give us 4. So 3 and 6, 6 is equal to 4 wholes. Continuing, 5/8 plus 7 3/8. So let's look at this. Our whole number is a 7. And our denominator stays the same. It's the 8s. And in the numerator, 5 plus 3 is 8. So we have 7 and 8/8. But remember, 8/8 would equal a whole. So we would do 7 plus that whole would give us 8. So 7 8/8 is really equal to 8 wholes. All right, we need to complete the number sentence, and this is 3 5 6 plus what gives us a whole of 4. What do I need to add to this to get to 4 wholes? Well, let's kind of see if we could draw out a number line, and very squiggly number line. And in this number line, we need to break it up into 6, because that's what our denominator says. All right, so here's a number line, and I broke it up into 6. So I have, starting at 0, I don't need to put the whole, because I know that I'm just going to be adding a 1 fraction to this to get us to a whole. So let's look at this. We've got, starting with 0, 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6, 6 6. So over here, we would place 5 6. And how much am I going to move up to get to that whole? Well, I only jumped up 1/6 to get to that whole. So 3 and 5/6 plus 1/6 would give us 4. Because 5 plus 1 is 6, and the denominator stays the same, so 3 and 6/6 is like 3 plus 1 is 4. And the next one, 5 and 3/7 plus what will give us a whole of 6. Again, we have to really look at the numerator and say, what can I add to this mixed number to get us to the next whole? Now, guys, you can create a number line if that's what would make you happy to solve this, or if you just know how much you can add to get to that whole, then do it. Again, here's my squiggly number line, and here's my 0, here is my 1, and I'm breaking this up into sevenths because that is what my denominator says. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 1 is the 7. So where is 3/7? Well, 3/7 is right here. This is 3/7. How much do I need to go to get to the next whole? Well, 1/7, 1/7, 1/7, and 1/7. So we moved up 4/7. So that is how much I would need to add to my mixed number to get us to 6 wholes. Because 3 plus 4 is 7. The denominator stays the same. 5 7/7 equals 6. 15 equals 14 and 4/12 plus what? So again, you guys can create a number line, or if you just know what we need to add to this fraction to bring us to the next whole, then do it. Whatever strategy helps you. You guys get, whatever you're comfortable with, you guys get to choose that. So in order to get to that whole, we have a denominator of 12. So what do we need to add to 4 to bring us to 12? Well, we would add 8/12, because that would bring us to 14 and 12/12, which is really equal to 15. We're drawing a number bond and the arrow way to show how to make 1. So we're going to use the number bonds and the arrow way to help us create that whole. So if we look over here, this problem was 2 and 4/5 plus 2/5. And what we're doing is that we made a number bond and we broke this up into 1/5 plus 1/5. So what we do is that we take this part right here, because I want to try to get to a whole. So I can take one of these, 1/5 plus 4/5, and that would give us 2 and 5/5. Because doesn't 2 and 5/5 equal 3? And then you're left with the other part of that number bond, you're left with 1/5. So this is how we would use a number bond to make 1. But also over on the right-hand side over here, you could see that we used an arrow, the arrow way, and basically just making these arrows. So I want to be able to add this 2/5 onto 2 and 4/5 to try to get to that whole. We want to make 1. So how can I do that to make the next whole, to bring it up to 1 more? I would take my 2 and 4/5. I would take plus 1/5, which would give us 2 and 5/5, which is really 3. And then I would need to take another 1/5, and that would bring us to 3 and 1/5. See, it's the same thing here. We just took apart the 2/5 and just showed step by step to get to that next whole number. All right, show a number bond and the arrow way. And I'm going to do this with the same exact problem, but we're going to show the number bond and then we're going to show the arrow way. So what I'm going to do is I want to try to get this to bring me to the next whole. And if I see 2/3, I know that I'm going to need to add another third to this to bring me to the whole. So we're going to break apart this 2/3. Okay, and in this number bond, we have a 1/3 here, 1/3 here. All right, that represents 2/3. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take this 1/3 and add it with this 1/3 to this 2/3. So when we do that, we have 3 and 2/3 plus 1/3 gives us 3 and 3/3, which we know is equal to 4. But we still have this other third that we need to place. So it becomes 4 plus 1/3 is 4/3. Excuse me, 4 and 1/3. So that's how we would use a number bond. But if we look on the right-hand side, we want to show the arrow way. So how would we do that? What we would do is we would start with 3 and 2/3. And then we would create an arrow. How much can I add to this to get to the next whole? Well, I'm going to add 1/3, which would bring me to 3 and 3/3, which is equal to 4. And then continuing with my arrow, I still have a third because we're adding 2/3, so I'm adding another third, which would give us 4 and 1/3. So these are the two types of strategies that we're going to use today to show how we can make that 1 that brings it up to the next whole. All right, let's continue on. 4 and 4, 6 plus 5, 6. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to use the number bond, and we want to get to that next whole to make 1. So let's use the number bond, and we're going to break apart 5, 6. And before I start breaking apart, I'm going to look over here at this 4, 6. What fraction can I add to this to bring me to the next whole? Well, it looks like I can add 2 6 to that to get 6, 6, which would give me 4, and 6, 6 would give me 5. So I want to break this up so I can get that 2, 6. So here we go. 2, 6. And what else are we left with? Well, 2, 6 plus 3, 6 is equal to 5, 6. And then we are going to take this part, right? 4, 6 plus 2, 6. And when we do that, we get 4 and 6, 6, which is really equal to 5. And we still have 3, 6 left over. So we are going to add on 3, 6. But like I always teach you, guys, please make sure that you are simplifying, reducing. And if you look at 3, 6, can we reduce 3, 6? Oh, yes, we can. The greatest common factor that we could use is 3. So when we divide the top and the bottom by 3, we get 5 and a half. So that's how we would use the number bond method to get to the next whole. Now, what about the arrow way? Well, the arrow way we would do by showing those arrows and showing the step-by-step of trying to get to that whole. So we're going to start with 4 and 4, 6. And what can I add to that to get to the next whole? Well, I'm going to add 2, 6, and that would bring me to 4 and 6, 6, which is really equal to 5. But we still have to add on another fraction because we're adding by 5, 6. So we already used 2, 6. What are we left with? We're left with 3, 6. So going to continue on, adding another 3, 6, which would give us 5 and 3, 6 as our answer. But again, always make sure we're simplifying. We divide the top and the bottom by 3, and we're going to get 5½ Again, showing number bonds and arrow ways to get to that next whole, to make 1. Solve 2 3/5 plus 2 3/5. So we are going to look at this first number and say, what can I add to this fraction that would bring me up to the next whole? And it would be 2/5. So I want to make sure when I use my number bond or my arrow way, whatever method works best for you, I show that by decomposing this and making sure that I'm showing 2/5. So let's get started with that. I am going to make my number bond, and this becomes 2/5, and we are left with 1/5. All right, so now we're able to take 2 3/5 plus 2/5, which gives us our next whole, which is 2 5/5, which is really 3. And then what we have left over in the number bond, we have 1/5. So the answer is 3 1/5. But what happens if we showed the arrow method? The arrow method, we would start with 2 3/5. All right, and what can I add to that to bring me to the next whole? Well, I'm going to add 2/5, and that would bring me to 2 5/5, which is really 3. And then I'm still left with 1/5, which would now give me 3 1/5. All right, so I just used 2 different strategies to help get to the next whole. I'm going to continue on by using our number bonds and arrow ways to solve 3 6/8 plus 4/8. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use my number bond and break this one up because I see 6/8 here, guys. And what do I need to add to 6/8 to get me to the next whole? It would be 2/8. So when I break this one up, I want to make sure one has 2/8 over here so I can get to that whole. So I have 2/8. Over here I have 2/8. So I'm going to take 6/8 plus 2/8 and get 3 8/8. All right, so 6/8 plus 2/8 is going to give me 3 8/8, which is really equal to 4. But I still have the 2/8 that I need to add on. So when we add on the 2/8, it becomes 4 2/8. But again, always look at your answers, your final answers, to make sure they're in simplest form. And 4 2/8 is not in simplest form. So we would need to find the greatest common factor, which would be 2. Divide the top and the bottom by 2. And when we divide the top and the bottom by 2, we now get an answer of 4 1/4. Now, what would this look like if we use the arrow way? So we're starting with 3 6/8. What do I need to add to this to get to the next whole, which would be 2/8, which would bring me to 3 8/8, which is really equal to 4. And I have to add on my other fraction, which would be 2/8. And our answer is 4 2/8. And when we simplify that 4 2/8, we divide the top and the bottom by 2, and we get 4 1/4. My daily goal, be the best that I can be. That is my goal that I live with every day while I play my video games. Hey, look at me. I mean, I am the best that I can be. And even so, I have a pumpkin head. And I'm still being the best that I can be, even though I have a huge pumpkin for a head. All right, do the best you can on those next problems. Solve 5 5/6 plus what gives us 6? And bring in your work tomorrow. 7 equals 6 1/8 plus what? So what can we add to 6 1/8 to get us to that whole of 7? And I want to see your work tomorrow. Use the number bond method or the arrow way to decompose 2 6/9 plus 7/9. And I want to see your number bonds or your arrow ways tomorrow. And your last one. Use a number bond or an arrow way to add 4 4/5 plus 4/5. And I want to see your number bonds or your arrow ways tomorrow. Hey, great job, guys. Be the best version of you. I know I'm the best version of me, even though I have a great big pumpkin or a head. Have a wonderful night.